I said I thought there was a slim chance that this league was around. Would it make a season 3? I don't know how it can now. I really don't. Unless some investor comes in that cares more about the social aspect of this and decides to prop them up for another year financially. I mean, why is TNT going to continue to be involved in this? I mean, honestly, why?
That number right there should terrify every WNBA player who turned down overseas contracts this year. 870 fans. That's not a typo. The league that promised to revolutionize women's basketball, that convinced dozens of players to stay stateside instead of playing in Europe, just opened their second season to a venue that holds less than 1,000 people, and they couldn't even fill that. But empty seats are just the beginning. The ratings data that just dropped from Front Office Sports reveals something far worse. We're not talking about a slight decline or a sophomore slump. We're talking about a complete collapse of viewer interest. And the two people who own this league, they're vice presidents of the WNBA Players Association, which means the same players who are currently refusing to sign the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement are watching their backup plan disintegrate in real time.
The campus just beyond Miami city limits was quieter during the opening weekend of the 3-on-3 Basketball League's second season. The Fan Fest outside was less of a throng and more like a collection of supporters. Inside the renovated arena, which added roughly 150 seats, bringing capacity from 850 to 1,000 fans, seats were empty. I told you guys. That first day, I flipped it over, and you can see the new seats.
Front Office Sports doesn't usually write hit pieces. They're generally pro-player, pro-league establishment. So when they publish an article describing opening weekend as less of a throng and more like a collection of supporters, you know something has gone seriously wrong. They added 150 seats to the arena this year, bringing capacity from 850 to an even 1,000. And according to their reporting, those new seats sat empty during opening weekend. The league immediately pushed back, claiming the weekend was sold out. But here's where it gets interesting. If the games were actually sold out, why were multiple media members and fans posting photos of empty sections? Why is the league spokesperson talking about ticket revenue being up 40% while simultaneously defending why the building looked half full on television?
Absolutely empty seats. There were absolutely seats that did not have people in them at all. And this is, look, outside of what? 6, 7, let's just, Caitlin Clark, Asia Wilson, Angel Reese, Sophie Cunningham, Sabrina Ionescu, and some role players. Outside of 5 players in women's basketball, they can't put 1,000 people in seats.
Let's talk about what sold out actually means in this context. The league says opening weekend was sold out. They also say resale prices for their Philadelphia game on January 30th are starting at $123. Think about that for a second. If tickets genuinely sold out to real fans who wanted to attend, why is the resale market flooded with inventory? This is the classic promoter trick. You sell blocks of tickets to sponsors, corporate partners, and resellers. Technically, the event is sold out from the box office perspective. But when game day arrives and half those tickets never got distributed to actual human beings who wanted to attend, you end up with a building that looks exactly like what we saw in Miami. Empty seats, scattered throughout, quiet atmosphere, no energy.
I would get on the horn to Nike Agumake, and I would say, we're signing the CBA. We're signing the CBA because that footing that you thought was so solid under your feet right now, nah, that was the rug, and it just got pulled out from underneath you. Listen to this, folks. And most concerningly for second-year league, ratings on TNT were lackluster.
Now let's get to the ratings, because this is where the situation goes from concerning to catastrophic opening weekend on January 5th averaged 175,000 viewers across TNT and TRU TV for 2 games. That's already down significantly from last year's average of 221,000. But wait, it gets worse. The 2 games that aired exclusively on TRU TV on January 5th, 32,000 viewers combined. That's not a typo. 32,000 people watched Unrivaled basketball on cable television. For context, this YouTube channel has posted individual videos this week that have been viewed more times than that. We're talking about a professional sports league with TNT backing, with some of the biggest names in women's basketball, and they're pulling numbers that would be considered disappointing for a mid-tier sports podcast.
On January 5th, averaged 175,000 viewers in 2 games that aired on both TNT and True TV. Listen to this. The 2 True TV exclusive games on January 5th averaged 32,000 viewers. I've got videos this week with more views than that. Wow. Okay. Games on January 9th averaged 139,000 viewers across TNT and True TV. The 4 games which aired January 10th, 11th averaged 71,000 viewers on True TV.
January 9th games averaged 139,000 viewers. The 4 games that aired between January 10th and 11th averaged 71,000 viewers on TRU TV. Last season, the league peaked at 377,000 viewers for the one-on-one tournament final. This season, they can't crack 200,000 even for marquee matchups. And here's the detail that should concern every player involved. These numbers are down compared to last season, despite the new television rating system that artificially inflates viewership numbers versus previous years. Nielsen changed their methodology to include out-of-home viewing and streaming in ways they didn't before. Every other sports property saw their numbers go up because of this change. Unrivaled's numbers went down anyway. That means the real decline in actual human beings watching is even steeper than these already disastrous figures suggest.
We're building Unrivaled for a long game, and we're confident in its outlook. Keeping in mind the same core principles and goals we set forth when establishing the league, Unrivaled CEO Alex Brazil told Front Office Sports Wednesday, "We're proud of the product we're putting on the court each week, and we're going to continue growing our audience while showcasing the best women's basketball players in the world. The leagues aren't built overnight." No, they're not. But your viewership just got cut in half. I mean, honestly.
Brianna Stewart came out trying to defend the ratings, talking about how television viewership is how the league will survive. And she's right about that. Unrivaled's entire business model depends on media rights revenue. They're paying players 6-figure salaries to play 3-on-3 basketball in Florida for 8 weeks. Those salaries don't come from ticket sales to a 1,000-seat arena. They come from TNT writing checks based on expected viewership and advertising revenue. So what happens when TNT looks at these numbers? What happens when they're averaging 71,000 viewers for games on TRU TV? That's not a television show. That's not even a successful YouTube stream. That's a rounding error in the cable television business. Why would Warner Bros. Discovery continue investing in a property that generates less audience than a rerun of a rerun?
Unrivaled has other ways to make money, chiefly ticket and merch sales. Despite empty seats in Florida, a league person said opening weekend was sold out. The league also will feature a tour stop in Philadelphia, which stands to pay dividends. The 2-game slate in January 30th will be played at Xfinity Mobile Arena, which has a capacity of roughly 17,000 and 20,000 fans. Oh my God. January 30th could be the most embarrassing set of days in women's basketball history. What happens if they get 2,000 people in a 17,000 seat arena? Unrivaled said the games are sold out and resale prices are starting at $100.
The Philadelphia game on January 30th might be the most embarrassing moment in women's basketball history. They're playing at Xfinity Live, an arena that holds between 17,000 and 20,000 people, depending on configuration. The league claims it's sold out. Resale tickets are listed starting at $123 as of last Wednesday. Let's do the math on what sold out might actually mean here. If they configured the arena for 10,000 seats and sold them all to corporate partners and resellers at discounted rates, they can technically claim a sellout. But what happens on game day when 8,000 of those tickets never made it to actual fans? What does it look like on television when there are 12,000 empty seats visible in a cavernous arena? That's not just bad optics. That's a death blow to the league's credibility.
As of Wednesday afternoon. So are they sold out, or the resellers that bought them? That's the question. I don't buy that. A league spokesperson said merchandise sales from September through opening weekend were up 50% year over year, and the ticket revenue was up 40% for the opening weekend thanks to added seats and games. And he goes on to talk about the fact that they increased their player pool. Listen to this. Quote, "I think there's a misconception that we don't want to play overseas," Alyssa Thomas said. "For me, it's about where the best opportunity is, where I can continue to grow my future. I enjoyed overseas." Okay,
Here's what makes this particularly significant for WNBA players. Unrivaled was supposed to be the leverage. It was supposed to be the alternative that proved players didn't need the WNBA's terms. It was supposed to demonstrate that women's basketball could thrive outside the traditional structure, that players had options, that the market would support premium salaries for elite talent playing in the United States instead of overseas. Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart, the league's co-founders, are both vice presidents of the WNBA Players Association. They've been among the most vocal players pushing back against the league's CBA proposal. The narrative was clear: we don't have to accept your terms because we're building something better. We're creating our own opportunities. We're proving the market exists. Except the market doesn't exist. Not at the scale they promised, not even close. The attendance is a disaster. The ratings are in freefall. The energy and excitement from year one has completely evaporated. And now players are giving interviews talking about how actually playing overseas isn't so bad. They enjoy seeing the world. There's value in the international experience. That's not what they were saying 6 months ago when Unrivaled was recruiting them. 6 months ago, it was all about staying home, playing in front of American audiences, building the domestic women's basketball market. Listen to Alyssa Thomas talking to Front Office Sports. "I think there's a misconception that we don't want to play overseas. For me, it's about where the best opportunity is, where I can continue to grow my future. I enjoyed overseas." That's a complete 180 from the messaging around Unrivaled's launch. The whole pitch was that players shouldn't have to go overseas, that Unrivaled would provide comparable money and better exposure in the United States. Now we're 8 games into Season 2, and players are already hedging, already talking about how overseas basketball has its benefits, already preparing their exit strategy for when Unrivaled folds. Because let's be honest about what's happening here, this league is not making it to Season 3. The math doesn't work. They expanded the player pool this year, which means higher salary expenses. They added seats to the arena, which means they expected higher attendance. They secured TNT and TRU TV coverage, which means they expected ratings growth. Instead, they got the opposite on every metric. Fewer viewers, empty seats, declining interest. TNT is not going to renew this deal. Why would they? You can't sell advertising against 71,000 viewers. You can't justify production costs and airtime for a product that generates less audience than a YouTube channel. Warner Bros. Discovery is cutting costs across their entire portfolio. They just lost NBA rights in part because they didn't want to pay the premium. You think they're going to keep funding a 3-on-3 basketball league that nobody's watching, and without TNT money, there is no Unrivaled. The ticket sales don't cover costs. The merchandise revenue, even if it's up 50% year over year, like they claim, isn't enough to pay 6-figure salaries to 30 players plus coaches, staff, facilities, travel, marketing, and production. This entire operation runs on media rights money. When that money disappears, the league disappears. So here's what every WNBA player needs to understand right now. Your leverage just evaporated. The alternative to the WNBA's CBA terms just collapsed in spectacular fashion on national television. Adam Silver and the NBA owners are watching this unfold and smiling. They don't have to do anything. They just have to wait for Unrivaled to finish dying, and then players will have exactly two options: sign the CBA or go play overseas. Actually, make that one option. Because as we just heard, playing overseas means missing training camp, missing team bonding, showing up to WNBA season tired and jet-lagged. It means being away from family for months. It means playing in leagues where the competition level is lower and the exposure is minimal. Players don't want to do that if they have a choice. Unrivaled was supposed to be the choice. It was supposed to be the proof that American women's basketball could support a second professional league, that the market was bigger than the WNBA's revenue projections suggested, that players deserved more because fans would pay for more. Instead, it proved the opposite. It proved that outside of about 6 or 7 marquee names, fans don't really care about women's basketball players as individual brands. It proved that 3-on-3 basketball, even with elite talent, doesn't have sustainable television appeal. It proved that you can't manufacture a sports league through social media hype and celebrity backing. You need actual fans willing to buy tickets and watch games, and those fans in sufficient numbers do not exist for this product. The Front Office Sports article is devastating because it's coming from a friendly outlet. These aren't critics looking to tear down women's sports. These are reporters who generally cover the space positively, and even they can't spin this situation into anything other than what it is: a failed experiment that's bleeding money and losing audience by the week. Watch what happens over the next month. Watch for the pivot in messaging from league officials and players. They'll start talking about building for the long term and year-over-year growth in certain metrics and engagement beyond traditional television. That's the language of failure. That's what organizations say when the core business isn't working, and they need to distract from obvious problems. The WNBA players who are holding out on the CBA, who are demanding revenue sharing and guaranteed contracts and higher salary caps, need to look at these unrivaled numbers and recalibrate immediately. Because the league they're negotiating with is about to have all the leverage. The NBA owners can simply point to Unrivaled and say, this is what the market actually looks like. This is what happens when you try to build women's basketball without our infrastructure and subsidies. You get 71,000 viewers and empty seats in a 1,000-person arena. Sign the deal. Take the money that's on the table, because the alternative just proved it can't survive, and your negotiating position is about to get a whole lot worse.